The first questions to you is how was your personal experience and how have you been diagnosed with pancreatic cancer? How was your pathway, you know, in the diagnosis? Can you tell us about your story, the impact that this diagnosis had on you?
Yes, hello everyone. Thank you for such welcome and opportunity to speak here and invitation. So answering this question, being 25 years old in the moment of diagnosis makes me a little bit outstanding case. And as in many cases, my diagnosis was a complete coincidence. So in general, pancreatic cancer gives symptoms when it's really advanced, and most of the time it's too late to do anything or to treat. I didn't have any classical symptoms that might have been connected to pancreatic cancer. I wanted to lose weight and felt a little bit down and depressed. So I went to my general practitioner and asked for some blood tests to see if everything is okay. But he refused and said that the last results from like 6 months earlier were good and my bad mood must be from something else. So I've changed my general practitioner to the lady my mom was going to. And she took my concerns very seriously. Besides blood tests, she also did ultrasound and find something big in my stomach, possibly starting in pancreas, but not being too sure about it, because ultrasound is not a diagnostic test for pancreatic cancer at all. But my tumor was 16 centimeters, so it was actually impossible not to see it. So my GP advised me to do the CT scan immediately, and so I did, and the CT confirmed that I have a 16 centimeter tumor of tail and body of pancreas. And with this information, I started looking for the best possible surgeon who could extract it. The one from my county, who was supposed to be the best regarding pancreas, was absolutely horrified when he saw my results. So me and my family, we decided to just keep looking, and with a huge support from my parents and my aunt, who is palliative care and hospice nurse, we found surgeon who worked in clinical hospital, but in the city about 200 kilometers from my hometown. But he was said to be absolutely the best in Poland. And when I went to see him, he first said that if it really is what it says in CT, then it's absolutely impossible to do anything, and only lunatic and crazy person would operate. He even suggested that I might drink too much alcohol or have some party, and that this may be just an inflammation. But he also at the same time promised to look at the CT images with a radiologist. And the next day he called me and said that it is really serious and that I must be operated immediately. But the closest possible date in his calendar is in 2 months. And so I waited those 2 months. And in the meantime, I've had a diagnostic laparoscopy in the cancer center in my county, and histopathology said it's neuroendocrine tumor. But later, after surgery and extraction of the whole tumor and the test of the whole tumor, the result was different, the solid pseudopapillary neoplasm. So actually, in my case, and in some cases, it's the matter of this one person, one curious and very inquired person, that might change everything.
Yes, thank you for sharing this. And then the second questions to you, according to your role of patients, supporting patients, and being a member of a patients advisory committee. What shall be done, in your opinion, to improve screening and early detection of pancreatic cancer?
As we are aware, as for now, there is no screening program for pancreatic cancer, and I might be a little too pessimistic, but I find it really hard to believe that there ever will be one screening program, because like ultrasound, which is the easiest and the cheapest option, is not like appropriate for diagnosing pancreas. Blood tests are not diagnostic as well, so patients actually should have CT or MRI as screening tests, and those are simply too expensive for, I think, any national health system to be treated as a part of any screening program for a whole population. What can be done actually is raising awareness. Pancreatic cancer has very high morbidity and prognosis are terrible. That's true. And that's true. And also because of that, it has a bad marketing, because if someone hears you have pancreatic cancer, there might be this vision of dying immediately coming up. And that's not always the case. Of course, as I said, prognosis is really poor, but death doesn't come just right after diagnosis. There are some treatment options. So people should know the most common symptoms of pancreatic cancer. So if they ever get suspicious or worried about something, they can go to GP and ask for tests instead of denying those symptoms and thinking that they will simply go away itself. And first and foremost, raising awareness and prevention, but we also have to think about GPs. They are first point of contact for patients, and they should be really aware and investigative. They shouldn't refuse to give patients referrals for tests, but actually encourage them to keep looking for answers. They should listen to the patient and take in what they say very seriously, and instead of treating it as packing or irrelevant.
Yeah. Yes. Thank you. You are very right. So we need to work on raising awareness and to inform people of all the possibilities, and to work on the updating, the training updating of the GPs, because this is the first contact point for patients. Thank you, Patrycja, for being with us. I would like now to move to the scientific world, and I'm happy to welcome on our panel discussions Professor Klaus Pantel. You explain us what is liquid biopsy in first, and second, how it can support screening and early detections of pancreatic cancer.
Yes, hello everybody. It's my pleasure to be here, and thank you for inviting me to this panel discussion. Liquid biopsy was actually introduced more than 10 years ago as a new diagnostic concept, and it really includes the detection of tumor cells or tumor cell products that are released from tumor lesions such as pancreatic cancer into the bloodstream or other body fluids, but the blood is really our main fluid to analyze. And then in the bloodstream, of course, these tumor cells and tumor cell products are distributed, and we can take a blood sample, from a venous puncture and actually enrich these tumor-derived products and cells, and then analyze them to get more information what's really going on in the patient at the time when we take the blood sample. And the nice thing about this is that we can take blood samples many times over the months and years, and also during therapy and during the follow-up. So we can use the blood actually to monitor the disease. And we hope that that will give us really very, very early information on whether there is a pancreatic tumor there or not, but also when the cancer is being diagnosed, to follow up the patients and monitor and detect the relapse earlier than with the imaging, so maybe there is then also a hope for that. And here in early detection of pancreatic cancer, we have a new European group, a consortium, and Nuria Malatz is part of it, and Matthias Löhr from the Karolinska, and many other excellent groups. We are 18 institutions from all over Europe. And the goal is really to develop a blood test using these liquid biopsy products and get an idea how to detect earlier stages of pancreatic cancer, because we know only 5% are really detected at T1 very early, right? So we want to increase the fraction of early tumors that we can detect, which can be then potentially cured by surgery. And the second goal is we have a lot of blood samples from individuals at risk that were collected over many years in the different institutions. And we want to see whether we can see in these individuals at risk that there is a signature coming up, a signal coming up that tells us early enough that pancreatic cancer is developing. So we want to detect the conversion from the, let's say, not cancer into the cancer stage in these individuals at risk as early as possible.
Yes, so thank you for explaining this and for giving hope also that the research is developing is going further in fundings and new possibility to fight pancreatic cancers and to early detect this very bad illness. And according to your experience as a researcher, what challenges do you face in your research work and in disseminating the results?
Yeah, one of the key challenges in the research on early detection of pancreatic cancer is certainly to have the right blood samples collected over time, because first of all, only 5% of pancreatic cancer patients have very early tumors. So we have to collect these from different institutions in Europe. It's a real team effort. And for the individuals at risk, you know, these 10% that Nuria Malatz pointed out very nicely, we also really need to get the blood samples over time. So we cannot wait 10 years or 20 years with the project. We have already to get access to these samples that were collected at the clinical sites. And this is really a challenge. So we need this kind of team effort really in Europe, you know, that researchers work together on this very, very challenging project. And in order to disseminate the results, you know, we have not only to publish in scientific journals, that's what we do all the time, but we also have to disseminate the information, you know, to the patient advocacy group and to the lay audience, you know, and to the public. And we can, of course, these days use modern instruments, modern tools like apps and other things, you know, which is really nice. I mean, it's not so difficult anymore to disseminate the knowledge, but I think there's still a gap between the scientific community and let's say the rest of the world. And we have to get out of this ivy tower and really disseminate our results and our possibilities also to the public, and particularly also to the people who are at risk or to the patients.
I would like to invite Gabry Kuijten. She is representing the Anticancer Fund. We are very curious to hear about what My Cancer Navigator is and how it works.
Yes, thank you very much for inviting me to the panel and allowing me to talk a little bit about My Cancer Navigator. So My Cancer Navigator is a human tool, if you will. It allows for patients or physicians or other healthcare professionals on behalf of patients to get unbiased, evidence-based information regarding treatment options, clinical trials, experimental treatments, etc. So people can come to us maybe if they've just had a diagnosis and they want to have some confirmation that the proposed treatment is the best one, or maybe they're already further on in their treatment journey and they want to know if there's additional options that they could consider if there's clinical trials. So we work with a team of scientists and physicians to really look into the options for each particular patient based on their medical information and their wishes as well. And it's explained in understandable language by one of our physicians in a video call, as well as in writing in understandable language with the proper references, etc. It's a free service and it's available to patients worldwide, as long as they can speak English, French, or Dutch.
Thank you. Thank you very much for introducing us this tool. It's very nice to hear that you have it also in different languages, so to have this worldwide approach. And according to your experience, so in ruling the My Cancer Navigators, what issues do you face regarding the early detections of pancreatic cancer?
Yes. So I want to say first, I looked into the numbers, and about 10% of the patients that contact us have pancreatic cancer, which of course does not reflect epidemiology, but it reflects the difficulties that patients encounter with treatment options and the many questions that they have. So I would say probably half of the patients that contact us have had some kind of delay in diagnosis, whether it's themselves thinking, oh, you know, I have some stomach ache or I have some back ache and it's probably nothing, I don't need to go to the doctor, to a GP or even gastroenterologist, not necessarily dismissing the complaints, but not considering the possibility that it might be pancreatic cancer. And particularly in younger patients, it is not top of mind with GPs. It's not top of mind even with gastroenterologists sometimes. So people may come to us after having months or even year or more of symptoms sometimes, and of course then come to us be diagnosed at a moment that there's no curative treatment possible anymore. So we encounter regularly those types of patients. And of course, we're not going to tell them necessarily, you know, that, hey, well, if you had been diagnosed earlier, but they often know or suspect that things might have been different had they been diagnosed earlier. So awareness is hugely important among the general public, but also amongst GPs and other clinicians.
The next panelist is Antonella Cardone. I'm happy to welcome Antonella. So the questions to you is from the perspectives of patients' organizations, how important are screening and early detections of pancreatic cancer?
So hello everyone, and thanks to Pancreatic Cancer Europe for the invitation to represent the patient organization's voice on such a relevant topic. And thank you, Luisa, for the question. Yes, screening and early detection are fundamental for any cancer. They can make the difference, not only between a low and high quality of life for cancer survivors, but they can determine if someone survives or not a cancer diagnosis. So looking specifically at pancreatic cancer, the median survival time for someone diagnosed with pancreatic cancer in Europe is 4.6 months after the diagnosis. So the story that we heard from Patrycja is really outstanding. I mean, she was extremely lucky. And the median 5-year survival rate for pancreatic cancer across Europe is 3%. Pancreatic cancer is currently the first leading cause of death by cancer in Europe, and if no action is taken, it is set to become the second cause of death, of cancer death soon. And the number of people dying each year from pancreatic cancer has risen steadily and continuously over the last 40 years. Patients affected by pancreatic cancer lose 98% of their healthy life expectancy at the point of diagnosis. This means that as things are now, the diagnosis is done way too late. So we need more research to identify early detection methods, but also more research on the social and economical impact of a late diagnosis. And this would help us to advocate for early detection and screening.
Well, thank you. Thank you, Antonella, for this insight. And then, in your opinion, what could be done at European level to improve screening and early detections of pancreatic cancer?
Well, in the European Union, 51% of deaths were caused by cancer in 2020. Mm-hmm. And a few weeks ago, in fact, the European Commissioner of Health, Stella Kyriakides, unveiled the Commission's new approach to cancer screening and the new proposal for updating the EU Council recommendation on cancer screening. So this new approach aims at reaching the target of 90% of the EU population who qualify for breast, cervical, and colorectal cancer screenings are offered the appropriate screening by 2025. The new recommendation also expands the population-based organized cancer screening to include the lung, prostate, and under certain circumstances, gastric cancers. So what we recommend is that early detection for all cancer types is included in the advice to member states, including the uptake of new technologies such as genomic testing, liquid biopsy, and multi-cancer screenings, as Nuria mentioned. So awareness of early warning signs of cancer is increased. We also recommend that primary care or GP's role in early detection is enhanced. We recommend that fast implementation of the recommendations across Europe is implemented, that inequalities associated with the early detection of cancer should be tackled, and the oncology workforce's professional needs should be addressed.
I am very happy to welcome in the panel Albrecht. He is the head of the Center for Healthcare at the National Institute of Public Health of Slovenia. The first questions to you is, according to your experience as coordinator of the EPAC joint actions, how ready are politicians and policymakers, not politicians, policymakers in the member state to address early detections and screening of pancreatic cancer?
Well, thank you very much for the invitation and for the opportunity to speak on this panel for this very important and unfortunately still difficult disease to tackle. I have to make a slight correction, Luisa. I'm not a policymaker. I'm a policy advisor. I'm a public health professional since 1992. So this is my the core of my business. But yes. I do know policymakers very well. In answering your question, yes, well, we have seen now a shift in what we expected on the recommendations for new screening programs of the European Commission, where at the step when the member states were asked to confirm the proposed text of the recommendations, there were a number of countries member states that actually did not support the new recommendations for lung cancer, prostate cancer, and gastric cancer screening programs, in spite of there being a rather clear and unequivocal recommendation by the scientific committee nominated by chosen by the European Union, European Commission. So it is a difficult moment, I have to say. Nevertheless, I think that policymakers are willing to listen. We have heard today from the MEP Sokol that, of course, with the right evidence, with the right approach, we are able to reach their attention and by producing compelling evidence. And I have to thank especially Nuria and Klaus for the very clear and very compelling approaches on how to address early detection of pancreatic cancer and what steps should be taken in the next phases. As a public health professional, I have to say that traditional requirements for screening, population-based screening, and Patrycja indirectly referred to that already, at the moment are not complied with in the case of pancreatic cancer. And it's very difficult that they ever will be. But of course, if we at least manage to identify through some process, whether this is a specific risk calculator based on the factors that have been presented already, or through an intelligent process of sieving the population that could be at risk, I think we could have an approach which will be original for this disease, because it is so different from the cancers which we all look at, you know, colorectal, breast, and cervical, where such huge achievements have been gained through the last years.
Yes, you are right. We are treating a very specific disease, and we need a very specific approach, indeed. And what is the future then? What's are we planning, or are you planning in the future joint actions like the cancer inequalities or Jane joint actions? How these issues of screening and early detections of pancreatic cancer is addressed?
I will quote Patrycja again, in the sense that pancreatic cancer is such a disease that cannot be treated just by anyone and everyone. It's a disease which has to be treated at really designated experts centers of expertise, which of course we can all work towards. One of the approaches that I will work on, and our sister project, Joint Action Jane, will also work on the next network of expertise, not specifically on pancreatic cancer, but still on cancers that are not rare, but cancer, because pancreatic cancer is somewhere in the middle. It is increasing in incidence, we know that. It is not rare, but of course it's not as frequent as the cancers that we always talk about. So we find it ourselves at the need to specify the criteria for high quality approaches, not only for diagnosis or early diagnosis, but also for very effective and comprehensive approaches to treatment, where expertise will be concentrated in a way that patients will obtain the highest level of care for their specific cancer. Speaking of inequalities, in the past, politicians were very much inclined to decentralize healthcare, to bring it very close to patients, to the populations. In the cases of such diseases, for me, it is important that we have a network on the ground that enables patients also from remote areas to get fast access when needed to the high-level care. We cannot have a high-level center in every small town, but we have to ensure that people who live in such areas have, we never can say the same access. You are always privileged in that sense if you live in a metropolis, but to reduce the inequalities by fast-tracking, by identifying ways of how to bring people to early diagnosis and, of course, adequate diagnosis. So this will be our main objectives: high standards of care, improved access to targeted care, and advances in research and innovation.